Good morning, everybody. My name is Maria Warner. This is my husband, David. It is our joy, our privilege to be here with you this morning to share our Sunday service. I would like to especially welcome the graduates of the Ananda Meditation Teacher Training course. How many of you are here? Please raise your hand. Yay. Wonderful. I wish you all success in your teaching. Please take these teachings of the masters and share them with every receptive soul who will come across your way. Congratulations. I'd like to read this morning from The Rays of the One Light. It's a book of parallel commentaries from the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible, written by Swami Kriyananda, based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. We have an interesting topic this morning. It is called, How Democratic is Truth? For all of you Americans here, this is very interesting. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. We live in an age when people assume that knowledge should be available equally to all. In matters susceptible of judgment by normal common sense, however, everyone knows there are exceptions. Access to a control room for intercontinental missiles is limited by universal consent to a very few. Access to the controls of a passenger jet is limited to those with the necessary knowledge for operating them, and also to those with the proper authorization. If people don't see the disadvantages of making more subtle knowledge universally available, it is only because they're ignorant of the risks involved. In the case of subtle knowledge, the main disadvantage of making it universally available is the harm it might do to the person himself. True, by mocking truth, he might undermine the faith of a few truth seekers. But then such tests can also be beneficial as a means of strengthening faith. Again true, the clever doubters' misrepresentation of those truths may dissuade a few seekers from following the spiritual path. But if a seeker is really sincere, he will recognize the truth eventually, because it resonates with his own being. No, the greatest problem accrues to the shallow doubter himself. To give him an opportunity to affirm his ignorance might only estrange him even more from the truth, delaying the time when he will turn, as all people do eventually, to the light. Thus the scripture advises not secrecy, but discretion in the sharing of truth. Jesus Christ says in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, Give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn again and rend you. And Sri Krishna says in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Never speak of these truths to one who is without self-control or devotion, who renders no service, who does not care to hear, or who speaks ill of me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
welcome everybody here today. This beautiful environment out here by the amphitheater, where it's very easy to see divine grace, divine beauty. This reading from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda. Let the flowers of my devotion blossom in the garden of my heart with the dawn of thy coming. Let me weave a garland of them and place it at thy feet. Om. Amen. Well, as Maria pointed out, the topic today is how democratic is truth. Raised in a democracy, you put a lot of importance in the rights of the individual, democracy, fairness, justice, and all these things. And the fact is that not only is truth not very democratic or democratic at all, the spiritual path is actually almost appallingly undemocratic. When you think about it, and I was trying to remember, I couldn't remember the meeting where we all voted to be created and put on this earth. I don't know if anyone else can remember it, but maybe my memory is slipping me, but I don't think we had a say in it. The whole spiritual path from the beginning to the end is not a democracy. And there's a downside to it. The fact is that we didn't have much choice. God created us. Yogananda said, go to God and blame God. He said he would go to the Heavenly Father and I think he would scold him and say, well, you created us, you get us out, help us out of this. So that's the downside of the spiritual path not being democratic. But the fact is, we have to accept it, we have no choice, so let's deal with it. There is an upside though, which is that the process, the end part of the spiritual path, freedom and liberation, imagine if that part was democratic. Imagine if our freedom and our realization all depended on a vote of, say, the people who vote for president. How would you like to depend on that? Of a thumbs up or a thumbs down, going to heaven or going to the other place, based on a vote of the populace like that. So it probably is a very, very good thing in the end that it's not a democratic vote. In a way, it really only depends on one vote. There's a saying in America, one man, one vote. Well, the spiritual path depends on our own vote. We do have the free will, we do have the choice to go to the light. And that's the only one that matters. It doesn't matter what all kinds of other people say, what people vote, whether people say we're all going to hell because we're practicing yoga or this or that. It really depends on our inner yearning, our aspiration, and our devotion to God. The way out isn't a vote, and it's also not a matter of just checking all the right boxes, either on the ballot or on the exam. We were put in this situation, but God gave us the way out. He gave us these masters. He gave us sacred teachings. He gives us grace and divine love. And so we have the opportunity to make that choice of choosing those things. This week we've been learning with many of our people here the Meditation Teachers Training course and also Yoga Sutras program, Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And we have so many wonderful techniques and practices here. But even then, it's not just a matter of doing all the right techniques and practices and, as I said, checking off those boxes. There was a disciple of Yogananda that Swami Kriyananda talks about, who was very determined to find God in this lifetime, and not even just in this lifetime, but very, very quickly. And he understood that the technique of Kriya Yoga, as Yogananda taught, one Kriya, which takes about a half a minute, equals 1 year of spiritual evolution. And so he began meditating 4, 6, 8 hours a day with extreme willpower because he wanted to check off all these Kriyas, get all these years of spiritual evolution, and get 1,000,000 years of spiritual growth, which Yogananda said was needed for realization. But very quickly, very soon, after launching on this idea of his, he left the spiritual path. He left Yogananda. He stormed out of there and he said, I didn't come here to dig ditches and to rake leaves and all these other projects that he'd been given. And the reason that he left is because he was missing a really essential part of the spiritual path, which is not enough just to do all the right things. Sometimes we do everything right. We get up in the morning, we meditate, we energize, we're really good to everybody, and then something bad happens to us. And we think, well, geez, I did everything right. What's happening here? One day, Maria and I, we gave Sunday service over at Hansa Temple. We did everything that we were supposed to do. We came out. Most of the people had gone, and there was our car with a flat tire, sitting in the dusty parking lot, and we were wearing our robes. You could, of course, only laugh, because these things happen. And really, the best response is to laugh, which I'll talk more about in a bit. Yogananda talked about this attitude of doing all the right things, and especially with Kriya, he talked about it as mercenary Kriyas. Yes, we do have to practice the techniques. They've been given to us as the key to our salvation. But Yogananda said about Kriya Yoga specifically, he said Kriya plus devotion works like mathematics. And he said that, Swami Kriyananda has said that Kriya without devotion is not Kriya. In other words, techniques without devotion can actually probably have more harm than good. And that's what the reading was about today, which is giving sacred teachings and techniques to people without them having the right attitude, devotion to God, aspiration, and deep sincerity can do more harm than good. And I've seen this with people who practice very aggressive Kundalini yoga techniques of really forcing the energy up the spine, because people read that by bringing the energy up the spine and concentrating it and uniting it here at the spiritual eye, they'll achieve union with God and realization. And it's true. But they don't realize that it also needs to be done with aspiration and devotion. And so people who force it aggressively with energy and willpower, I've heard one of our teachers talk about people who end up sort of spinning out and having problems as Kundalini casualties, which is people who force this energy, this Kundalini energy, without the right attitudes of devotion, simplicity, sincerity, service to others, all the attitudes that are necessary in addition to the right practice of these teachings and techniques. There is also something else that God has given to us to show us the way out of illusion. It's probably arguably the most undemocratic aspect of the spiritual path, which is the guru. I hear so many times, you see a bumper sticker that's very common in America, question authority. And you see people very often who have a real issue with the idea of a guru. Why do I need a guru? I mean, it's a democracy, and I can do whatever I want. And recently somebody asked Swami Kriyananda this question, well, why do I need a guru? I mean, who needs that? And his answer was very good. He said, you don't need a guru. No one needs a guru. But then he qualified it. He said, but if you really want to know God and find freedom, then you need a guru. And this is what God has sent us to us. God has put us in this very difficult situation of being in delusion, creating us, making it very difficult. But again, he's also shown us the way out, given us teachings, given us a guru. But again, it's very undemocratic. Gyanamata, Sister Gyanamata, one of Yogananda's disciples, somebody asked her one time, why do you always do what he says? Talking about Yogananda as the guru. I mean, you have your own free will. You can do whatever you want. Why do you always have to listen to him and follow him? And her answer was very simple. She didn't get into any intellectual reasoning or argument. She just said very simply, since I've started doing what he says and following him, I'm so much happier, and I'm going to keep on doing that. Of course, it's much deeper than that. It's also that you find freedom. You find freedom inside. People who follow the spiritual path, who follow the guru, do what he says. The perfect example this year is the 60th anniversary of Swami Kriyananda's discipleship to Yogananda. And of all the things that he has done with his life, that he's expressed in his life, but all the gains that he's made in his life, and you see that spiritually. You see him swimming in divine joy all the time and completely free inside. He especially gives credit to the Guru, to Yogananda. because that's how we are free in the end, by opening ourselves up to the help of someone who God has sent to us. Sometimes we look at it, and we look at life, and we look at tragedy, and we say it's so unfair. And sometimes it is. It's just, like I said earlier, we didn't ask to be created. We had a tragedy this week with a boy who was born at Ananda many years ago. He passed away suddenly in an accident this week. And you just have to ask at times like that, why? Why is someone born, created, and taken away suddenly? And this world, sometimes it really doesn't make sense. But all we can do is listen to God, pray, try to feel that joy. And when we don't feel the joy behind the situation, we can only weep tears and offer those tears to God and be cleansed through that process, as I think many people here were this week. But we respond to tests. We have the choice of how to respond. And again, one person, one vote. And we do have the vote, we do have the choice, we do have the free will of how we react to situations in life. Swami Kriyananda talked about that a lot in the last week in Los Angeles. I would really recommend listening to his talks if you have the opportunity. But he told an interesting story that I think we've heard before, but is especially poignant with him because he's led a life of absolute dedication to the light, to serving others, to serving Yogananda, and has received a fair amount of abuse and scorn from certain people for it. And I think it was especially poignant this week. He was again, perhaps faced with that. And he was talking in his talk, and he wasn't addressing it directly, but he told an interesting story of a saint in India who would go out for a walk every day. And one day he came back from his walk to the ashram, and his disciples were so concerned because he had blood coming down his back and he had all kinds of wounds in his back. And they were so concerned, and they said, "Master, what's happened? Why are you injured so badly?" And the saint, this master, who was a true master, was just laughing and smiling joyfully. And he said, "Oh, the boys were throwing stones at me and we were having so much fun, and it was just so joyful." And he was completely free inside. No matter what was happening outside, no matter what test was happening to him, he wasn't responding by saying, "Oh, it's so unfair," or "Why me?" and thinking about himself. He was just free and feeling divine joy. Now, this isn't always easy to do when people we love or people we're close to throw stones at us and we're bleeding, and the reaction tends to be very different from, "Oh, we're having so much fun." But the spiritual path teaches us, and it gives us the taste of inner divine joy more and more over time. Meditation gives us that joy. In the beginning, it's very difficult to contact. Over time, we start to get little glimpses of it. Over the years, we're able to contact it more and more deeply, until with someone like Swami Kriyananda, it's always bubbling to the surface, no matter what is happening outwardly. But even short of that, you'll find over time that it's easier and easier when tests come to at least stop and look inside and start to feel that divine joy underneath everything. I had a wonderful example of this also. It's another story. And Maria and I were out walking one day here at Ananda, and one of the joys of living in spiritual community is just the teachings that happen that are given to you freely by sincere devotees and longtime members, and just people who aren't, quote, teachers and ministers, but who really are, because they give you some very good lessons. And we were out walking one day, and as we were walking, Patricia Hall drove by in her car, and she stopped and we said hi. And she was very joyful and very happy. And she explained that she had just passed the something test. And I wasn't really sure. I didn't quite hear what test she had passed. But it must have been a very difficult and very good test, because she was very joyful. And I assumed that maybe it was she works at our clinic, and I assumed it was some medical exam or something that was very important. And I asked again what the test was, and he said, "Oh, it was a 2x4 test." And it still took a moment, as one old-time Ananda member said, for the penny to drop and for me to finally get it. And for those of you who don't know, Swami Kriyananda tells a story in his autobiography. When he was with Yogananda, And one day he was in the desert, and he was working with Yogananda, helping him to build a swimming pool. And they were digging these big holes for the pool, and they had these huge mounds of sand that were left over. And so Yogananda asked Kriyananda and another disciple to take this long 2x4, the long board, and just start to level off these big piles of sand. And it was very, very hot. It was already into and past their lunch hour, and they were very, very hungry. And this idea of using a 2x4 to level out these huge piles was, on the face of it, was pretty impractical and really not that great of idea, apparently. And so they started leveling these piles of sand, and the guy who was with Swami was starting to grumble more and more, and he was getting hungry, and he just could not believe what they were doing and what Master was asking them to do. And Master kept asking them, just do one more pile. And he was grumbling more and more, and Swamiji was starting to, maybe if not outwardly grumble, wonder, what the heck, why are we doing this? I'm hot, I'm hungry, what's going on here? And finally, Yogananda yet again said, let's just do one more for the nth time. And finally Swamiji just stood up and he just started laughing. He saw the joy behind this experience, and he saw Yogananda's joy, and just thought, oh, what a wonderful play this is. The boys are throwing stones or whatever. But he felt the joy behind it. At that very moment, Yogananda said, okay, now you can go and have lunch. We're done here. And that was the whole point. When we can respond to tests, not personally and not by saying, oh, why is this happening to me? And don't we tend to personalize tests as our test, and why is it happening to me, and it's unfair, and of course all these things are probably true on some level. But if we can see every test as the 2x4 test, as Patricia was blessing me with her lesson there, and feel the joy behind it, when we feel that joy, when we see the humor behind it, we've already passed that test on the most important level. We still have to face practicalities of the test. We can't just be what I've heard someone derogatorily call a bliss bunny and just kind of ignore everything in our joy. We have to deal with these things. But we've already passed the test when we feel divine joy in these experiences. And the reason is because we're getting out of our ego. We're not identifying with our little self. We're not thinking, oh, this test is happening to me. Because as Swamiji was saying in Los Angeles, there's tests happening every moment to everybody on this earth, all over the place, probably a lot worse than what we're experiencing. So why identify with the little self? When we stop identifying with ourselves, the ego starts becoming dissolved. And just in that very simple act, we start feeling divine bliss, divine joy. In that freedom from attachment and bondage, we start feeling our true nature, which, according to the Indian scriptures, is Sat Chit Ananda, ever conscious, ever existing, ever new bliss of God. And that's who and what we really are. As we work on ourselves over the lifetimes, but even over the years in such a supportive environment of having divine friends, by serving others, by giving to all, we start dissolving the bondage of the ego. That's one of the beautiful things of living in a spiritual community, is not only the lessons that we all share with each other, but the fact that people are so generous and not only give us the space to stumble and use our free will in all the wrong ways sometimes, but to bless us unconditionally and to see the highest in us and to support us in our spiritual efforts. We have been given free will. We don't really have a whole lot of free will. Someone described it once as enough will to be in the train, and you have the free will to decide whether you want to get in the front car of the train or the back car of the train. You can move around a little bit because there is a world karma. There is a group karma, and we are in a world that's going in a direction that we're caught up in. We don't have a whole lot of choice. So we are on that train, but we can choose which car we want to be in by choosing to go towards the light, to go towards God. We have been given the free will to do that. We have been given the one vote to do that, and it is our choice. When we make a mistake, when we use that free will in the wrong way, give your mistake back to God. Maria quoted me recently, someone she heard who said, when God gave us free will, he must have known it wouldn't always go his way. And so God knows that when we make a mistake, when we use our free will in the wrong way. You can go back to God and say, you know, you started this. You put me in this position, you gave me free will. Surely you knew that when you gave us free will, that it wasn't always going to go your way. We were going to make mistakes. Give your mistakes to God. Give your successes to God. Give your tragedies to God. Give your tears to God. And you'll find that freedom coming more and more, that divine bliss. There's another way of looking at this, which is that Swamiji, in one of his talks this summer, he was talking about this world of delusion, as he called it, Dvaita, which means this world of delusion that we're in. And our goal with everything that we're doing is to go back into union with God, which is one. That oneness is divine bliss, is divine joy. It's who and what we are. And we tend to get caught up in the successes, the failures, the tragedies, the joys of life, the big drama of life. And if you look at this world, there's 5 billion or something, 6 billion people. There's billions and billions of tragedies and dramas going on every moment. And our problem is that we identify with our own. And we identify with ourselves. And because of that, we're caught up in this world of delusion, of up and down, up and down. The goal of yoga is union. The goal of the spiritual path is to offer ourselves with devotion, with grace, with sincerity, into the union of divine bliss. When we practice that over a lifetime, you will find success on these endeavors. I promise you, I guarantee it. I tell people that when people practice these teachings, not just the techniques, but the attitudes, devotion, sincerity, success is guaranteed. Yogananda said that to the sincere devotee who's yearning and practicing these things, God will come with divine inevitability. And that is the promise, but it's also, I think, all of us who have lived here many years have actually seen that that's true. And again, all you have to do is, again, look at someone, Swami Kriyananda. I hold him up as an example, not because he's unique, but because he's someone who's been doing these things for longer than us. He's been practicing for 60 years as a disciple of Yogananda. And he will say again and again that he is not unique. What he's done, anyone else can do. And that is the promise for all of us as we practice this spiritual path, these spiritual teachings, with deep devotion, with yearning and sincerity. Our success eventually is guaranteed. And it's our choice, our one vote, to go in that direction and use it wisely, use this lifetime wisely as a way to find eternal freedom. As Yogananda said, those who follow this path, talking about Kriya Yoga specifically, he said you can hope to become completely free in this lifetime. And that is a promise that I think many of us will see in others and ourselves in this life. Bless you.